Hello, friends. Today I'm going to share with you some of the things that have helped me cope with the grief and the depression that comes along with fostering and that comes along with adoption. I'm not an expert, I'm not a counselor. I'm just going to share my experience and open a conversation so you can share some of the things that have helped you as well. We're all in this together, and one of the things that I have desperately needed and received in this journey is a connection with the community around me. And so, even in this larger community of YouTube or people that I don't know, many of you have experienced, maybe you think it's just a little thing, but if you put it in the comments below, it could help somebody immensely and maybe be life changing for them. So, please take a minute and think through your own journey as you watch this and comment on some of the ways that you have coped with the depression or the grief of fostering and adoption. One of the ways that I'm going to start with is that I have had to meditate and journal on what are some grounding truths for me that I know without a shadow of a doubt that I need to remind myself of in the times when it feels so overwhelming. And one of those is that my grief is worthwhile because I'm carrying the grief of the child. And I mentioned before in one of the other videos that some people say, oh, I could never do that. I would get too attached. And I say, well, wow, that you might be really great at it, because that's exactly the point. The point is to get attached. The point is to love the child wholeheartedly, because that's what the child needs. I might be able to get through this. I might be able to take the next steps and not necessarily recover. I will never be the same as I was before I started fostering, but I will survive probably. Whereas if the child in this critical point of their lives doesn't have somebody that loves them and communicates that love, that they are precious, that they are worth crying for, that they are worth being there for, that they are worth loving, they're not going to make it. They're not going to recover. So one steadying truth, one grounding truth for me is that my grief is worthwhile. It's worth something. Even if I don't necessarily know how to bullet point and articulate what it's worth. It's worth something because I'm carrying the grief of the child with them. It doesn't mean to take away the grief of the child, but I'm helping bear that burden. It's kind of clear that when you bring in a child who's experiencing trauma or who has such a burden, that part of the journey is carrying that burden with them and carrying that trauma with them. And it will be absorbed by the rest of your family. That seems like a scary thing. And I remember when I first was considering the fostering journey, I was so scared. What will happen to my other son? And I don't want it to be traumatizing for him. But in the course of conversations with one of my dear friends, Tiffany, and her husband, I was asking Tiffany about her husband, Matt, has grown up in a family where they were fostering throughout his whole life, and they fostered maybe 70-something children in the course of his life. And I asked Tiffany, how has that affected his heart and who he is? I'm concerned about my Solomon. And she said, Matt has a more open and expansive view of family. He is able to open his heart and welcome people in, and I value that, and I would rather that than the opposite of having a more exclusive and guarded sense of family and not letting people in. And I thought that was really interesting. Even though fostering and adoption entails absorbing some of the trauma of the children that you care for and that you love, one of the grounding truths is that grief is worthwhile, not only because it changes the child's life, but because it changes mine. So one of the other grounding truth that kind of flows into is I have always wanted to be genuine and real. It may not make sense to every one of you, but that's okay. I'll just share what it has made sense to me. I have always wanted to be a genuine person that has clarity and understanding and sees things as they really are in the real world. So in the midst of this overwhelming moments where I'm like, I have got to escape this real world, and I feel like I wish I could just go back to the carefree, you know, girls traipsing through the desert with not a care in the world and thinking everything's great, everything's gonna be just fine. But really, that's not real. And I have never been one for pretending. Um, I can't even hardly do small talk at all. I just learned, I think, last year how to do a little bit of small talk, but it's not something I care for. Um, and so I realized that like maybe I'm kind of like a wild person, but I want to be real, and I want to be genuine, and I want to see things and care for people. Which kind of leads me into the next point, is that in order to care for people, you have to have an open heart. And in order to have an open heart, it's going to get kind of like broken. It's not closed, it's like open, like a flower is open. It's vulnerable and it's tender. Um, and that's the kind of heart I want to have. Those have been three very general grounding truths that I have to remind myself of quite often as I journal and pray and meditate and walk through this journey. That the grief is worthwhile because I have carried some of the grief for the children. That it's worth loving them because they needed to be loved. That I value what is real and what is genuine. And the escape is not something, or the escape into pretending that everything's fine again is not really what I want. And also that an open heart is a tender heart, and an open heart is vulnerable, but I'd rather have an open heart than a closed one. I would not have been able to do this at all without prayer. And not just like a storybook prayer, but like a lament and a grieving and a crying out to God. The Spirit intercedes for us with groaning. That kind of prayer. I can't do this. And I need some divine intervention. I need some divine love. I need to be refilled. The prayers that are just coming from such a place of neediness. And God answers those prayers. When we were first thinking about fostering, we were not believers at all, and we had intentionally distanced ourselves from the faith and said we don't want any part of it. So we were living in Utah, and we went through the fostering classes in Utah. And the fostering classes in Utah, for some reason, are a lot more brutal than the ones in Memphis. They were traumatizing. The classes themselves were traumatizing. They were just showing lots of like horrible images and horrible stories. And I guess that's part of preparing families for it is going to be a really traumatic event, or a really traumatic journey, a really traumatic part of your life to be fostering. And that's part of it. So I understand. During the summer that we were taking those classes, I was actually painting the outside of my house, which took all summer. And I remember just painting the house and crying and wailing and realizing deep down I will not be able to do this without being able to pray. And I can't pray because I don't believe that God is going to answer those prayers. So I can't do this. And I thought to myself, after many days and months and months and months of journaling and meditating on it, and I think maybe I could muster the adrenaline and energy and kindness it takes to love the child, but I could never let them go without being able to pray, without being able to pray that God is going to go with them somehow, that God is going to carry them somehow, that God is going to hold them when I can't, and speak peace to them when I can't, and communicate his love to them when I can't. I knew, and thankfully so, I knew that I could not let them go back to the birth family without being able to pray. So I talked to Ben about it, and we decided that we wouldn't be able to do it if we weren't able to pray. So we shifted at that point to thinking about adoption instead of fostering. And God in his grace brought Art Solomon home through that process. And I'll share a link in the description below of a documentary that shares our spiritual journey. And I'll talk about it in another video, especially how it pertains to the fostering and adoption. But as we held this precious child in our arms, God used that moment to speak such abundant love to us, such abundant forgiveness and grace, and not just that he'd given us this beautiful child, but that he loved us, and that he wanted to hold us more than we would ever know, that he wanted to hold us and carry us much more than we longed to hold and carry this child, that he had been waiting for us much longer than we had waited for this child, and much more intensely, and that he'd forgiven us and loved us and cherished us and treasured us. And we both felt that so intensely. We didn't actually do anything with that until much later, but it was the kind of first step in bringing us back into the faith. So when we came back into the faith, actually probably a year later than that, when we started to pray and we started to trust God to listen and hear us and be there with us and love to hear from us and answer our prayers, we started to feel this weight, I guess, this weight or longing for fostering again. And I didn't want to tell Ben because I didn't want him to feel like pressured into it or guilted into it or nagged into it, because it has to be a team. You have to be on the same page. So I didn't really know how to communicate that with Ben, and I didn't want to tell him, "Oh, I've been thinking about fostering. Do you think we should do it?" Because I don't want to do it because we should do it. I wanted to do it because both of us were like wholeheartedly driven to do it. There's nothing else. This is what we must do. We can't do anything but take the step forward. So I didn't tell him, I didn't tell any of my friends that I was thinking about fostering again, because I didn't want them to tell him. I didn't want him to get pressured into it at all. But I did tell Solomon because I felt that was safe, because Solomon wasn't speaking at the time. He was just only saying yes and no and that kind of thing. So my little toddler Solomon and I said, I've been thinking about maybe bringing another child into our home. What do you think about that? And he said, And I said, wow, you okay with that? You would share your toys? And I said, would he or she be able to sleep in your room? And he said, no. And I said, oh, I get it. Okay. Well, maybe we only had a 2-bedroom house at that point. And I said, maybe he or she could sleep in mom and dad's room. He said, no. And I said, well, I guess that settles it. I mean, where would the child sleep? And someone and motioned for me to come with him, brought me to the kitchen, opened the pantry cupboard, moved out a bag of flour and said, here. So it was really cute because he thought the baby would be able to sleep in the kitchen cupboard next to the bag of flour. But a few months later, maybe even within that month, Ben came to me and said, hi, I can't get fostering out of my mind. Maybe this is something that we're being led into. So we started thinking through steps that we needed to take. We even sold that house and moved to Memphis so we could afford a bigger house, so that we could be next to family, be near family, so that we could take the steps towards this fostering journey. In other videos, I will go into more detail about what brought us to our fostering journey, because it's a crazy, wild story. But what I want you to know now is that we would never have been able to do it without prayer. And so prayer has been the most critical part of it. Like I said, not prayers that are just storybook prayers, but prayers that are just really gut-wrenching, heartfelt, pouring out your heart to God and being heard and being cared for. So I've mentioned my grounding truths. I've mentioned that we couldn't have done anything at all without prayer. Um, Journaling has been super important for me. Journaling to get my thoughts out. It just feels like such a muddle sometimes. Counseling has been important for me. We went through Memphis Family Connections in our counseling for our children and for ourselves. We went through also other counselors. I went to Claire DePriest, she's been an amazing listener. It was hard for me to go to counseling. I felt like that would have been kind of what's the word? A little bit shaming of me to admit, oh, I need to go to a counselor. And also, there were times when I needed to go to a doctor and get an antidepressant. And I was ashamed of that, but please do not be ashamed of taking the steps that you need to take care of yourself. This trauma really affects us, and it affects our brain, and it affects our heart, and the stress affects our body. There will be times when you maybe need to take medicine or maybe need some counseling sessions. It may not be forever, but my point is, listen to your body and do what your body needs in order to take the steps forward, whether that's medicine, whether that's counseling, whether that's extra exercise to relieve the stress, exercise that's gets your heart rate up so that your heart is somewhat protected from this stress that we're always feeling. It's very important to exercise. It's very important to drink water and take in nutritious food so that your body has enough energy to survive the day. That seems obvious, but it's a lot easier said than done. So set up with your support networks times when you can exercise. Set up ways and habits that you can practice every day that will help you get the nutrition and the sleep and the exercise and the water and the counseling that you need. Another huge aspect that has helped me cope with the grief and the depression is the community. So we have a 117 foster and adoptive moms group in Memphis. And right now it's a Facebook group, so you can look up 117 moms. I can put it in the description. At the beginning of my fostering journey, we were meeting once a month in a coffee shop to share this journey with each other, and that was really, really helpful for me. I'm not sure if they've gone back to that after COVID, but that was really, really helpful for me. And even if it's just on Facebook, like sharing what you're going through so other people can give you insight and that have been through this and they're on the other side of it, that speak your language, that understand your heart, and can pray for you, can pray along with you. That's really been important for us. Our church, as I've mentioned, is Mercy Hill Church, and they have many, many, many foster families and adoptive families. I remember the first day that I visited that church, I was so shocked because I couldn't find a family that had all one color in their family. Like there were every family that I looked at had someone sitting with them that was not the same color as they were. It was amazing. It was really overwhelmingly beautiful. I found out later that it's not like every single person is a foster family, but many people had brought their neighbors. Many people that are sharing kind of the load of the foster families. So some of the families in our church have adopted so many kids that they spilled over into other families that sit by them and that kind of share the load of caring for them. That was really evident as well, even on that first gathering. So 117 Moms, Memphis Family Connection Center, our church, and also our family and our friends our family has been so wonderful to accept the sacrifice of having things be different. Everything's different when you're a foster family. Easter's different, Christmas is different. There's the children are missing their birth family no matter what kind of birth family they are coming from. They're missing them wholeheartedly. And they have certain triggers associated with these holidays. And it's just kind of hard. And even if everything's going fine, there's still that underlying sadness and underlying stress of helping someone feel a part of the family who doesn't quite feel that yet. So our families have been really wholeheartedly ready, and I appreciate that so much. Also, we have friends that have been like family to us. We were fostering during COVID, which is a whole different level of isolation, but we had two friends, Rachel and Logan, who were in the guest house, who are part of the family, and the kids could go to their door and knock on their door and get this like few minutes of much needed attention when I was wiped out. I couldn't give them any more attention no matter what. I was just like, I'm done. I can't do any more attention. I've got to just survive through this. But they would go to Rachel and Logan's door and knock on the door, and Rachel and Logan would give them like, okay, I'm going to give you a math problem. If you can do this math problem, you get an M&M or whatever. But there's not a word for what these friends have been to us. They have been life-giving. They've been life-giving. They're giving life to us and to our children, babysitting for us, and just loving on our children, giving them this extra attention, spinning them around, pushing them on the swing, watching them do their crazy dances, coordinating dances with them, all kinds of stuff, that giving them the energy and time and grace, even when Ben and I were spent. Friends, you know who you are, and you know I am so grateful for you. Thank you for being with us on that journey. I am so deeply aware that we would not have been able to make it through any of this without your presence and your grace and your prayers for us, and then also your wholehearted love for our children. One other thing that I received that I would not have been able to do this journey without is just receiving grace. God gives us abundance of grace. There's no shortage of it. It's not a scarcity thing. So when we come to God and say, I have messed up again, I need help, I am so sorry, there's grace for us. There's also grace from our children and grace from the people that we've hurt. So when you go to them and say, I am so sorry, that's not the way I want to interact with you, will you please forgive me? There's an abundance of grace from the child as well. Even if they're a teenager, there's an abundance of grace when you're able to ask for it and receive it. Some adults haven't yet felt comfortable apologizing to a child. And they think, oh no, then I will lose my power or whatever. But there's so much power in apologizing, owning your mistake and admitting it and confessing it and learning from it. I would encourage you to receive grace for yourself, and ask for grace from God, and ask for grace from your children and your other people that you've hurt, because there is an abundance. I'd also encourage you to give that grace to others, to forgive others, even if they haven't asked for forgiveness. I feel there's something important I need to say more about forgiveness. I'm not sure if I have all the words right now, so I might put that in a different video. But the practice of forgiveness has been something that's been very strange, like surreal, restorative practice for me. It's something that Tana Ottinger mentioned to me and suggested to me. She runs the Memphis Family Connection Center, and it's been such a godsend to me. She suggested that I practice forgiveness for myself for my children, for my family, for the birth family. For myself, realizing, like not hiding from it, realizing that I have made some horrible mistakes. Owning my mistakes with my children and saying, I want to move forward with this. Will you please forgive me? And also forgiving myself. There's an abundance of grace for that. There's not a scarcity of grace. Not with God and not with our children, not with our family members. When you come to someone and you are open with your owning your mistake and ask for forgiveness, there is healing in that. When you forgive yourself, there is healing in that. Also, forgiving the children before they ask for it. I don't know about you, but sometimes in the back of my mother mind, there's like a little list of, okay, they did that 17 times, but on the 21st time, I am going to blow up. Like, forgive them. The third and the fourth time, when you see it racking up in your little mother mind or whatever it is that you have, forgive them before they say sorry. Forgive them because they are children, because they love them, because forgiveness helps you move forward. Because forgiveness helps you become the person you want to be. And then forgiveness of the birth family, long before they ask for forgiveness. Forgiveness helps your own heart be ready to love the child. Forgiveness, how should I say, helps your own heart be present and available for love. And if you forgive the birth parents, even just little baby steps towards forgiveness of the birth parents, even just wanting to be able to forgive the birth parents and praying for the capacity to forgive the birth parents. It's not going to come all at once, I don't think. At least it didn't for me. But praying for the capacity to forgive the birth parents, because you love your child and they love their birth parents no matter what. That's how they're designed. That's how they're created. They're made in their heart to long for their birth parents no matter what. And in order for you to love your child well, you need to have an open space in your heart that has forgiven their birth parents. Because if you're resentful of their birth parents, and it's going to interfere with your connection with your child. Okay, I'm going to mention a couple books that have helped me. I remember when we had two beautiful children that were with us for a little more than 2 years. A brother and sister, they came to us when she was 6 weeks old, and they left after she turned 2. And we loved them wholeheartedly, of course, from the beginning. And we actually thought they were going to be ours forever. We were brokenhearted, of course, when they left, which is how it's supposed to be. I remember standing with Solomon, and I couldn't go home because I didn't want to see their beds or their room, and I didn't feel like I could do anything. I stopped the car at a park, and I got out, and I was standing there thinking, how am I gonna go on a walk in this park with Solomon? We were just standing there at the beginning of the trail. And Solomon, who wasn't speaking much still, said, how are we gonna survive? I said, I don't know. And we stood there in silence for a while. And he said, oh, I know something. We'll pray. And we'll remember them. We'll remember them sad times and some silly times. And we'll cry. And then we'll sleep, he said, and then we'll pray. And then we'll cry, and we'll remember some more, and then we'll sleep. I said, yeah, that's it. That's it. That's exactly it. And so that's what we did. We prayed and we cried and we remembered and we slept. We prayed and cried and remembered and slept some more. And that intensity of I'm not sure if I can say the intensity of the grief changed, but the grief changed. I guess the intensity of the grief did change, I think. I think I can say that. The grief is still there, and there are certain times when I see someone that looks like them, that, like the curl of the hair behind her ear, or a little toddler running the way he would run, and I'll just burst into tears. So the grief is still there, but the grief grows. I mean, it changes, just like a child grows. The grief changes, and so we were able to make room for it and keep going. One of the books that's been helpful for that with our children is the Goodbye book. This is by Todd Parr, and we really have loved him because in many of his books, he talks about adoption, and he talks about having differences and have the differences being okay. Having two moms, it's okay to have two moms, and it's okay to have a wheelchair, and it's okay to be adopted. Different things. So this is called the Goodbye book, and it's a book for children about processing grief, and pretty much says kind of the same gist as what Solomon was talking about in the park of, this is how we'll get through it. We'll cry and we'll pray and we'll remember them. And we may not feel like talking, and we may not feel like moving at first, but that feeling will change. And then we might feel like talking to someone. We might feel like drawing a picture. We might feel like writing a letter. And we'll always remember that we love them and that they loved us. So that's been really helpful. I would recommend this for any foster family, and have it with you before you say goodbye. This is another book for me that has been really, really helpful. It's called God on Mute by Pete Greig, Engaging the Silence of Unanswered Prayer. I recommend every foster family have this. I've read through a lot of books on grief. It's something that even before I was fostering has been something that I've been studying, like how do people get through the grief that they feel. Maybe because I want to be a student of the real world and able to care for people who are brokenhearted. I've wondered, like, what does that mean that God is close to the brokenhearted and hears the prayers of his people? Why doesn't he answer all of them? And this book has been really helpful for me, more than many of the other books that I've read. I would recommend that each of you check this out. It's really been life-changing for me. And then this one. This is called Every Moment Holy, Volume 2 by Douglas McKelvey. I'll put a link in the description for all of these things. This Volume 2 is geared more towards death and grief and hope. And so he has liturgical prayers that are absolutely beautiful. I mean, it's not, like I said, it's not just a prayer that's a Sunday school prayer or a storybook prayer. These are prayers that come from genuine grief. And a lot of times I didn't know how to pray. I haven't known how to pray as a foster parent or an adoptive parent or a teacher or a mom in general. And this helps bring words to the grief. I've asked him to write another volume based on, that's kind of geared towards foster and adoptive parents. And I'm not sure if he will or not. Maybe some of you will write this book that's prayers for, like, how to pray when you go into court, and how to pray when you go into the TPR case, and how do you pray when you go into jail to visit the birth parent, and how to pray when your child is melting down, and how to pray when your child is triggered from a trauma that you have no control over. How to pray when you are saying goodbye, when you have to say goodbye to a child that you love. How to pray when you are missing a child that you love. Those kind of things I think would be so helpful. Maybe I'll write it someday, who knows. But this is geared towards grief and death and hope. And so you might have to change the words a little bit when it's like this one has a prayer for like when you've lost a child. And in this one, they're talking about when you've lost a child to death. But when you've lost a child in fostering, it's somewhat similar. I might have to change a couple words here and there, but I'm going to read to you the first prayer. And I'm not trying to preach in this. I do hope that any one of you that are fostering or considering fostering you might call God a different name than the one that I call. But you're going to need something beyond yourself in order to complete this journey. This is a liturgy begging the grace to accomplish what is beyond me. You can already tell from this title that it's not just like a normal prayer. A liturgy begging the grace to accomplish what is beyond me. O Spirit of the living God, who raises your people from death to life, the comforting of your children in their hard journeys through the valley of the shadow is from beginning to end your work, not mine. I am neither wise enough, nor compassionate enough, nor timbered enough by present griefs to form prayers adequate to serve those your people in the face of an enemy so formidable. I am wholly unfit to enter the holy sufferings of others, to give guidance or true comfort, to speak words of consolation that would name the wounds of their grieving hearts, or wrap them in compassion and embrace, or remind them that there remains a firm eternal hope which will outgrow and outlast death itself. If this is not your work, then I would not have it be mine, for I would not bid the grieving hang their sorrow or their hope on any words that cannot bear their weight. So then, take this meager measure of anything I might give, O God, and bless it. For the benefit of your people, your children. Breathe spirit and life into these flawed forms. Let my insufficiencies be met by the multiplying power of your grace. I know I will encounter discouragement in this labor. I know I will often experience the creative process of an impossible struggle against myself and against darkness. Even so, be at work in and through me, O Lord. I will sometimes falter, lose heart, abandon course, and be tempted to turn to diversions and old comforts that cannot sustain me. Even so, be at work in and through me, O Lord. On my best days, I might be too confident in my own abilities to recognize the depth of my need, but more often I will be too empty, too spent, too crippled by my brokenness to believe I have anything to give. Even so, O Lord, be at work in and through me. In the end, this is my sole means of stewardship, to repeatedly ply the imperfect talents with which you have entrusted me, daily offering to you my poverty, begging you to fill the hollow forms of my offerings. O Holy Spirit, meet, fill, and quicken now these insufficient gifts. Inspire prayers that would shepherd and comfort your people, your children, even in their grief, voicing their mortal lament and their eternal hopes, and gently turning their gaze to the promise of the coming resurrection, to the hope of a world remade, and to the splendor of a King who will soon return to redeem all sorrows. Amen. Amen, right? That resonates with me when I go in to teach as well, because it's something that's way beyond me. What I'm hoping to accomplish is something way beyond me. I hope any of these ideas that I've shared might be some help to you in your journey. And please mention some of the ways that you have coped with the depression and the grief in your journey as well, so we can get through this together with God's help. Thank you. Bye-bye.